Well, Kevin, it's a pleasure to be back with you. Thanks so much.
Good to see you again, Jason. Yeah, thanks for having me.
It was an absolute tour de force last night. I mean, you basically eviscerated the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton crime syndicate. It was such a comprehensive presentation. Anyone who has not had the chance to see it, I really would urge them to do so. I mean, even for people who think they understand everything that's going on, with the email investigation, the Russia collusion investigation. You've covered so many topics in that talk last night. We've got thousands of views on it already, literally, and I hope that people will check it out. If they haven't been to Crowdsource the Truth, the original Crowdsource the Truth Jason Goodman channel is active once again. Of course, there was the unfortunate situation where we had a lot of malicious attacks, strikes on the channel, but there's a good opportunity for people to see your comprehensive presentation and to understand the massive felonies. I love it how you laid out the violations of the actual legal codes. And I don't know that we've seen it done exactly as you did last night before. And of course, Charles Ortel has done a tremendous job delving into the detailed financial aspects. But it's great to see so many different points of view come together. And I mean, we said this yesterday, but of course, you and I have no ability to prosecute. And we're doing everything that we can do in terms of laying it all out. It's really putting it up there in such a way that if there is no prosecution, how the hell do they explain that?
Right. That's right. And what we laid out last night, of course, in detail, is there have been clear felonies, obvious felonies, not only obvious to law enforcement, but to the people themselves. And those are violations of Title 18, and these people need to be indicted. It's crystal clear. And the goal is to get the message out there that Sessions and the DOJ and Congress have got to move on these things, and these people have got to be charged. Our justice system hangs in the balance here, and its credibility. If these people walk, it just shows that our whole justice system, even at the high levels, is a sham.
I agree with you completely. And that's the type of thing that citizen journalists, authors, people like you and I are able to do. Of course, we're unable to prosecute these people, although Larry Klayman has raised the really interesting prospect of a citizens grand jury. And I decided sort of last night that I'm going to call Larry, and I really want to put a big effort, my own effort, into bringing you and Larry and Charles Ortel, and I know that Larry and Tom Fitton have had some history. I hope that there's something that I can do to bring those guys together, because I think Judicial Watch is doing a lot of good work.
Absolutely. And
they're complementary organizations in a variety of ways, and we need to sort of put our differences aside.
I think so.
And really deal with this, because this is like a monster that threatens to take over our country.
Well, we're in a war, and this is no time to be arguing about who's got the best or which ammunition. I mean, we need to join together in this, and I'd like to see everybody come together. I think that would be really important, Yeah.
Now, there were some articles on True Pundit this morning. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to listen to the ongoing hearings, but we're seeing just more testimony from the highly unscrupulous, in my view, Rod Rosenstein. We've got DeSantis basically grilling Rosenstein and saying that he should be recused. That seems quite clear. Talk a little bit, if you can, please, Kevin, about some of the conflicts of interest, just to reiterate some of what you were saying last night, that Rod Rosenstein has with regard to presiding over this Russia investigation, et cetera.
Well, sure, Mr. Rosenstein, however you want to pronounce it, he has been the one that has been behind withholding the documents from the intelligence committees, and they are his boss. He's even gone so far, as I mentioned last night, threatening the intelligence communities that the FBI is going to conduct an investigation on the Senate and subpoena some of the congressmen. I think recusal is a mild demand. I think perhaps impeachment is probably a better word.
How about indictment?
Indictment. They've obstructed Congress by preventing, and in some cases blacking out these documents, and that's Rosenstein that has done that. A recusal, I think, is a kind way to do it, because I think it should go a little bit farther than that. I think it should be at the very least impeached.
Right. And then you also brought up several points last night, and Charles Ortel has brought them up. I like to reiterate them because, again, this is such a complex story, and I think people appreciate hearing about it again and again because it really burns those strongest points into your head. Now, Rod Rosenstein, he presided over the initial investigation into the Clinton Foundation, right?
Yes.
Buried that.
Yeah. Well, we've got the three amigos. We've got Robert Mueller, James Comey, and Loretta Lynch, all presided over the Clinton Foundation investigation, of which, as Charles points out so well, there's international fraud, felonies committed, and all three of those three amigos exonerated the Clintons in what I think Charles has called the largest unprosecuted charity fraud in history.
Yeah.
And Mueller and Lynch and Comey let it go. And we saw last night how those three follow Hillary Clinton throughout her career as her fixers.
That was amazing, and you had an incredibly powerful infographic where you linked each of the individuals to Uranium One, the email investigation, the Russia investigation. It's undeniable.
Yeah.
I don't see how this cannot go forward to indictments without the entire judicial system and government just collapsing. There's nothing there if they're not going to prosecute this level of criminality.
You're absolutely right. Like I said earlier, the credibility of our justice system rests on these cases, specifically Hillary Rodham Clinton, Comey, and others who have committed documented, clear evidentiary felonies. And our justice system relies on this. If they are not prosecuted, then, as I mentioned a little while ago, our justice system is a sham, and the American people can no longer trust in our government to protect them and the FBI to carry out the law ethically and legally. And that's what is at stake here.
Absolutely. And as you've pointed out, Charles is very detailed in the charity fraud aspect of the Clinton Foundation. What I really enjoyed and took away from your presentation is that while you're not as focused on the financial aspects of the charity stuff, you have a broader view of the very serious crimes that extend beyond the charity fraud aspects. And that's just stunning. I mean, it really is. As you said, even if it's just the four of them, Lynch, Comey, Mueller, Clinton, that's a conspiracy. That's a criminal cabal.
Oh, I think so. Yes, that's criminal conspiracy, indictable criminal conspiracy, and I think as we discussed last night, there's plenty of evidence there to go down that route. Yes.
And Uranium One is a big part of it. You've described it for the first time that I've ever heard as a Russian intelligence operation.
Yes.
Talk some more about that.
It's abundantly clear that Russian intelligence targeted the Clintons specifically for the U.S. uranium, and they targeted them through the Clinton Foundation. They snuggled up to them within the United States. They gave contributions to the tune of millions of dollars. These are Russian nuclear officials into the Clinton Foundation, buttered them up, and coerced them into joining the other 8 members to allow them to gain 20% of our uranium supplies. This was a espionage operation on the part of Russia to gain our uranium, and the most incredible thing is Robert Mueller at the time for the FBI was doing a counterintelligence investigation on Russian espionage in the United States involving nuclear officials, bribery, extortion, at the same time Uranium One was going on, and at the same time as they were making contributions into the Clinton Foundation to co-opt the Clintons, and eventually it worked. They put millions into the Clinton Foundation. Sure enough, they got the Uranium One deal. 20% of our uranium was given to, it was a tremendously successful operation for Putin. It was given to Russia, and the claim was made, well, none of the uranium left the United States. Baloney. We know that some of it went to Asia, somewhere in Asia.
How do we know all that? For the skeptics who are watching, because there's many people that are going to say, you and I, we're conspiracy theorists, we're in an echo chamber, everybody who likes what we're saying is agreeing. What I really want to do is I want to share this information with a broader audience, with people who don't realize that these things are happening. So how can we give those people the confidence that these are facts, not just your opinion?
First of all, I would ask them to go look at our presentation last night, because we provide documented evidence to include the exact violations of Title 18 USC and exactly what those violations were. I would encourage everyone to go out and search all the news reports and all of this, all the information that is out there, and verify every single thing that we say. I hope they do that, because we rely on an informed public, and especially the people that are skeptical, I would encourage them more. If they really are skeptical, then go out and check us out. If they really are skeptical, watch my presentation last night and check every single fact I laid out there out and for themselves. And
Right.
I would really, really encourage the skeptics to do that, because those are the people we want to see what's going on here, because this is serious.
Yeah, and this has been a valuable trip for me because obviously there's a lot of people who show up on Skype and you meet people through the internet. You and I have had an opportunity to spend some time together, get to know each other a little bit, and I'm very thankful for that. I have to say, you exude credibility,
Thank you.
not just in the documents that you've presented and the performance reviews from the CIA, that we've never seen anything like that from anybody else before. There have been guys on Fox, we've seen people on InfoWars. The internet is rife with bloviating morons who we don't necessarily need to name, but
right.
they're engaging in lawfare, they're doing all kinds of things, and you speak with authority, with confidence. I just can't say enough about the confidence that I have in what you've been saying.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's true. Sadly, there are a lot of frauds out there. There are a lot of people that say they were with the CIA, they did such and such with the CIA, and I would ask them to show us their credentials,
Right.
and prove it. And we've seen some pretty serious frauds out there. They'll come back with a lawsuit instead of proving who they are.
Right.
And I would just encourage people, when someone comes out and says that they get information from the CIA or they're from the CIA, I would demand some credentials from that person to prove who they are, because it is rife with frauds out there.
Absolutely. And incidentally, even this broadcast seems to be coming under attack. There's been a penetration to the Skype account, and obviously we have no one on Skype, but there are phone calls coming in right here trying to dissuade us from doing
Sure,
this.
of course. Yeah.
People who think that I'm somehow lying or whatever, I don't understand that, because all I'm doing is providing a platform for people like you to come forward and share this information, and we encourage people. Here, it's just nonstop.
Well, and I would say to that, go ahead, make our day.
Yeah.
Go ahead and pick at everything we say, everything I say. Pick at my credentials all you want. Of course, there's going to be trolls. I've had trolls ever since I came out, both from the government and otherwise. That's going to happen. Make our day. Test us out. Check us out. Check our facts out. I mean, I dare them to do that. I would ask them to do that.
Well, sadly, when I've done that in the past, I've asked people to go find evidence to support these false claims that I'm Mossad or any of the other horrible and ridiculous things that they claim. And then they invent evidence or stories that they present as evidence. And another thing that I've noticed that's analogous to what's going on with Donald Trump, we get this fake dossier, and then it becomes the basis of this investigation. So now the investigation is real. There is an investigation, but the evidence behind that investigation is totally fake.
Yeah.
Same thing with these lawsuits against me. The lawsuits are filed and are real, but the evidence is fake. So it's amazing. I mean, the justice system essentially has already failed if we've got a Robert Mueller investigation based on this fake
That's
evidence.
correct. Yes. That is absolutely correct. And we've talked about this before. I and others call it lawfare.
Yes.
Where these people are using the law to attack their opponents and file bogus, frivolous suits to try to milk money out of their target in terms of legal fees. And they're doing it not because the case is credible or the facts are credible at all. They're doing it just to attack their opponent and try to drain them financially. And people need to understand that is a tactic. It's lawfare. They're using it to try to silence people. They're using it to try to silence free speech.
Yes.
And people need to understand that's what they're doing.
Yeah, and even in the case of the president, if it's not a civil suit directly intended to win money by winning the suit, it's just a matter of, gumming up the gears and slowing everything down and, muddying the waters in terms of people's perception of Donald Trump. So
that's right.
what do we see happening next here, Kevin?
Well, we've gotten further, we as a people, we as the new administration have gotten further in exposing this high-level corruption than any time in the last 50, maybe 60 years.
Probably ever.
Probably ever, yes. We are seeing the shadow government, deep state, and we can use both of those terms. We are seeing them flat out in the open. They've been caught red-handed breaking the law at the highest levels. John Brennan, the CIA, James Comey, Hillary Clinton, the Secretary of State, violating, committing felonies. It's hanging right out there now for everyone to see, where it's been hidden behind the scenes for years.
Yeah.
That's progress.
Agreed.
Because they have been outed for the first time for the last 20 years as a former Fed and, of course, a person who loves the Constitution. For 20 years, I have been frustrated that this Clinton crime syndicate has gotten away with this stuff for this long and remained hidden and controlling all these political officials. Finally, at least it's out there where people can see it. That's a huge triumph in and of itself. Now we need to push that some of these people get criminally charged.
Absolutely. And you've created a bit of an aha moment in my mind over these past 2 days. And I know you've been saying this for quite a while, which is why I want to reiterate some of these points, because even when you know it, and a lot of people came up to me after the speech yesterday and said, I knew all that stuff, but I've never seen it laid out so concisely. It's just like, it really grabs you and says, hey, listen to this. But this separation of the deep state and the shadow government. And when we see Hillary Clinton going around the world, to New Zealand, to everywhere, and she's deriding Donald Trump, she's insulting him, she's calling him a bully, she's calling him, all kinds of things that we've really never heard an American politician say about a sitting president. And it's become okay. They say, well, he's a bully, so we're a bully, whatever. But Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama remain really important figures in this shadow government.
Yeah, they do, and they're still directly connected to that. And in terms of the shadow government, as I mentioned last night, Hillary Clinton has been intimately connected to the shadow government, the secret intelligence agencies, going all the way back when she was First Lady. That's important. She's had her hooks and her roots into that, and her tentacles growing out of that since she was First Lady. So it's been decades that she's had this movie. So now you've got former CIA directors. You've got John Brennan.
Right.
You got the DNI James Clapper coming out and making these unbelievable statements against Donald Trump in favor of Hillary Clinton. You want to talk about a connection to the shadow government. These former CIA officials, Michael Hayden of the NSA, calling Donald Trump a useful idiot, and all these other names in support of Hillary Clinton. This is the shadow government defending their girl, their woman, whatever you want to call it, their lady, for as a better term, the global princess, whatever you want to call her. These former heads of intelligence are actively defending Hillary Clinton. This is the shadow government defending First Lady of the global order, Hillary Clinton. So that shows the connection to the shadow government right there that goes back decades. That is chilling. The power that this woman has garnered in our shadow government and our intelligence agencies, where they're defending her publicly. CIA directors never do that. They never come out publicly against a new president. It's against the esprit de corps of the intelligence system. It's against their ethical standards, and yet they're doing it to protect this lady.
Yeah, and the deep state aspect, the corporate aspect, where the media is part of that. Everyone's known it, of course, but again, really enunciating that and separating it from the intelligence. I mean, these are the PR firms that are putting the message out. And one thing that I've been remiss in not addressing with you is that I think it was the 2014 National Defense Authorization Act, or 2016, where Barack Obama made it legal to conduct propaganda campaigns within the United States.
Right.
That's stunning, and certainly CNN, the Washington Post, the New York Times are actively engaged in this.
Yes.
I've been particularly interested in BuzzFeed, because again, I see that, what's happening in this world of YouTube and crowdsource the truth seems like a really mini, analogous to that, where BuzzFeed is almost like the bargain basement retail outlet for the New York Times, where they can put out any old piece of crap without damaging the reputation of the New York Times. And then the Times says, oh, well, BuzzFeed said this. We had nothing to do with it.
And that's how they do it. They use that So the New York Times kind of stays out of it, and then they cite BuzzFeed, who goes out and puts out many times, which is just garbage. Then it gains a life of its own. Then the New York Times picks it up from BuzzFeed as if they didn't get it themselves. It's a racket. It's organized. It's a conglomerate. We all know that. It's well funded. Anybody that watches the national media sees this information twisted, deleted, misrepresented to the point where it's nauseating. And it's always in favor of, guess who? Our Lady Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation, and it's always in favor of that. Why? Well, I think the answer is obvious.
Yeah, and speaking of well-funded, I do want to remind people that you and I are basically paying for this sort of effort out of our own pockets because we fear for the future of the country. So I want to remind people to go and visit fortheloveoffreedom.net, where they can purchase your book from the Company of Shadows, and they will get a signed copy of the book as well as the secret code that, please remind everyone, Kevin, what that code is going to help them do once they receive the book.
Yes, when I published From the Company of Shadows, in chapter 25, I go into the CIA's cover-up. My family essentially was poisoned, almost died, my wife and oldest son. The CIA covered that up, and the evidence was so strong, as we mentioned earlier interviews, that the CIA was ordered to a legal mediation, which they signed, and then they just abandoned that, and they shut our case down with the state secrets privilege and threatened me with prison if I talked to anybody about my family's sicknesses, their break-ins, and their cover-ups. So I wrote that into the book From the Company of Shadows. They let me publish things in there about how the CIA recruits agents, specifically our targeting assessment, and all these kinds of operational things they let me put in there. But when I wrote about the doctor's diagnosis of the poisoning, when I wrote about the environmental test results that I had done, they blacked all that information out, which is illegal based on an executive order by Ronald Reagan. The CIA cannot black out information that is unclassified simply because it embarrasses them. So they broke the law right there. So what I did, after a good bit of thought, was I developed and built a code into the text and ran that by the CIA centers, and of course they missed it. And if you plug the key to the code into the text, it'll go through toxic exposure, poisoning of a family, and then identify who was poisoned, aka my wife and kids, towards the end. And I programmed that in there, saying, no, not my Constitution. You don't. I don't care if you're the CIA or how great and powerful the great and powerful Oz you think you are. I happen to adore the Constitution, and you're not going to do this. And after about a week of good hard thought, I plugged that code in there and then published the book, and it's in there today.
That's great. And the poison is still unknown, exactly what was used.
It is unknown. It's been compared by doctors, one to a burst of radiation, to another to a chemical weapon. The symptoms were neurological damage and bruising all over, bleeding of the gums, loss of memory, severe headaches, things like that. The closest thing the docs could get was a burst of radiation. I don't think it was that toxic.
But why did they say that? I'm curious about that because we've heard, of course, our friend Quinn Michaels had a collapsed lung. And I saw somewhere else this idea that certain kind of inert chemicals can be applied to people, and then when radiation activates those chemicals, that's when something happens.
They can do that. We were never, obviously, they were ordered to burn down our house to destroy the evidence. So we were never able to get in and get samples. We did catch them breaking into the house and spraying a chemical on the ceilings. It was invisible to the naked eye, but unfortunately for them, I had a black light, an ultraviolet light, which will show a lot of chemicals. And we hit the ceilings with this UV light and showed the brush strokes where they had brushed and sprayed these chemicals all over the house.
Amazing.
So they broke it in. Was that the toxin? Was that covering up the toxin? We were shut out of the house. The house was quarantined, and we were never able to get samples of that. We could only go with the symptoms. The burst of radiation came from an immunologist who tested my oldest son, who's a hero in and of himself, and that an 18-year-old kid stood up against the CIA on his own, and he's got his own book out now they're trying to stop.
Oh, wow.
His mail's been broken into, and his hard drives have been erased. So he's out there pushing, and they're trying to sequester that. But he's heroic in and of himself. But we tested, I secretly flew him out. We had a well-known immunologist test his immune system, and his T cells down at the bone marrow level were so bad, the doc said it looks like he's been hit, quote, with a burst of radiation. That was the doctor's words.
Wow.
So we flew him back. We knew there was black mold all through the house, and it was just there were scorpions, and some people.
Well, how did the scorpions get there?
Well, this is Texas, and the house was largely not very well taken care of before they put us in a dump, basically. And I was second in command, but it was intentional, I think. So the scorpions, they'll get away from you in Texas if you let them. And I peeled the walls off, and there's black mold. So at first we thought, well, maybe it's black mold that's making everybody sick, but the symptoms were much worse than that, really, really deadly, and they matched chemical weapons. Now, some of the things, the reason that the CIA tried to eliminate me was because our case could have easily been settled. It was settled. Was because of what was going on at that facility.
At what facility?
Where I was stationed, where this all happened.
Okay.
I know what it was. I can't go in there. The New York Times, Charlie Savage, I think it was a front page article, did a pretty good article on that. But what they were engaged in at that facility, the CIA did not want the public or Congress to find out about, and that's why they tried to eliminate me and shut this case up, rather even than just settling it.
Huh. And if I Google New York Times, Charlie Savage, CIA, will I find
or
it?
just my name, New York Times, Kevin Shipp should bring it up.
Let's see if we can find that.
And Charlie, I have to say, did a super job getting out there and pounding the street and developing. He had a pretty gutsy piece he put. There's a lot of things Charlie obviously couldn't get access to because of the nature of the facility, but he did a pretty doggone good job.
Okay, so this is the thing talking about mistreatment on the job,
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Right.
people can check that out on the New York Times. There
Right.
are still some journalists at the New York Times who are doing their job properly, so that at least is some consolation. But I mean, again, the point is people who are behind you on this really need to go to fortheloveoffreedom.net, order the book. It's a great way to support Kevin and his efforts against the deep state. And something I forgot to mention yesterday is that, of course, people can also follow you on Twitter. You're on there at Kevin_Shipp,
Right.
2 P's, and you're tweeting about a lot of items of interest and news stories that I think viewers of Crowdsource the Truth would really appreciate. And this is your primary occupation. You don't have any other job that you do.
Yeah, when I came out and stood against the CIA, as I mentioned last night, they froze my retirement, which was a felony. OPM, we had to talk to OPM, say you're committing a felony here. The agency ordered them.
OPM is the Office of Professional...
Office of Personnel Management, which handles the retirement of agency people in the open. And the CIA commanded OPM to withhold my retirement funds, which that's a felony. Of course, they committed multiple felonies in this case.
And can you get any redress on this? Are you
No, because what they did was they shut my case down using the state secrets privilege. They came to our attorneys and they said, after the settlement agreement was legally signed, they said, you tell Mr. Shipp to accept a fraction of this settlement, or we're going to invoke the state secrets privilege and seal his case so that no one will ever see the evidence. We're like, you can't do that. You signed a legal statement. Lo and behold, that's what they did. They abused the state secrets privilege badly. They used it completely aside from what it was intended for. It was unbelievable, tyrannical move and an unbelievable illegal use of the privilege to shut this down so this evidence didn't come out. I lost my CI retirement completely.
Wow.
Literally, Sue and I live off a shoestring now, and I travel and do a lot of this on my own dime. And we just started, I think, a donation button. Sue is my business manager. Just put that on our site so we can at least have our expenses covered. But we've been doing this just out of our belief in this mission since 2012.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, and I want to thank you personally for doing it. And again, I can't encourage people enough to go there. So that the donate button is going to be on the website here, fortheloveoffreedom.net.
Correct. Yes.
Yeah, so people should visit that site. Oh, there it is. I see it right there. So people can go on the site and they can support your work, which is very important. Now, I mean, back to one of my most frequently visited topics, President Kennedy. We know that he had vowed to dismantle the CIA, to smash it into 1,000 pieces and blow it to the wind. What do you perceive Donald Trump is doing that's different than what Kennedy did?
Doing much the same. I think the last time that we saw a president challenge
More calls.
Yeah, yeah.
They won't stop.
Yeah, welcome to our world. Yeah. We verified that both of our phones are tapped 3 days ago from a high-level official who knows how that's done.
You and Sue?
It's us and me and Sue, yeah. Yeah. But, we figured that's been going on for 5 years now. They're tapping us, we citizens, probably this sort of thing. It goes on. There's no question about it. So that's no surprise. Back to what your comment, we have never seen a president challenge the shadow government, in this case the CIA, ever in history since John F. Kennedy. Every other president, including Ronald Reagan, just went along with the shadow government and the CIA and let them do what they were doing. And essentially, presidents are told, even Michael Hayden admitted this in an interview, listen, Mr. President, we know what we're doing here. You just sit back in your chair and you let us run the intelligence community. And that's typically what presidents do, is just step back and let them do their thing. Well, not John F. Kennedy and not Donald Trump.
Right.
Allen Dulles was fired by John F. Kennedy. Allen Dulles had a cabal of CIA, high-level CIA officers working against Kennedy's policies. He despised him. He hated him for what he'd done to him. I think there is a ample amount of evidence that the CIA was directly involved in the JFK assassination, and without question, they were involved in the cover-up of the assassination itself, so much so, it was so ridiculous that they put Allen Dulles in charge of the Warren Commission.
Yeah.
And Allen Dulles cultivated the CIA witnesses who would testify, who wouldn't, and what they would say throughout the entire commission. The fox was managing the hen house.
Exactly. And people who haven't investigated or even looked into on a cursory level might, again, think that we're conspiracy theorists, but this is just one item. A lot of people, I think, are being woken up by different things. Las Vegas shooting was certainly a big red pill moment for many people.
It was,
9/11. Have you and I discussed the Vegas shooting at all?
We have a little bit, yes, and there's some, as in some of these other cases, there's some things that just do not add up to the official story.
Right.
And we have seen, as I mentioned last night, sadly, the government has done false flags in the past,
Right.
lied to the people, and actually intentionally caused some of these wars and coups and terrorist things to happen while they lied to the people. We know they do it. It's a hard psychological line for an American to cross, that their government would actually do such a thing. Once you see the evidence and you cross that line, you really can never trust what the government says again. You have to check out every single thing the government tells us now, which is the way it should be in a republic democracy anyway.
Mm-hmm. And you've spoken briefly about how the CIA was involved in training the Los Angeles Police Department going back as far as 1968, obviously the murder of Robert Kennedy. Is there any connection between the CIA and the Las Vegas Metro PD?
Not that I know of. I think it's worth for people checking into the RFK assassination also, because there is solid evidence of extra bullets that were fired. The LAPD removed the door frame with the bullets holes in it, took it out and burned them. We know now that the LAPD has been trained by the CIA for years. Most people don't know that. I know that RFK Jr. is now pushing for more investigation into the Robert Kennedy assassination, which was without a doubt a criminal act. It was not just Sirhan. The evidence is there, and we have to ask ourselves again, Jason, because this is hard evidence. These are facts. Why does the news media label people a conspiracy theorist and not even examine or shut down the evidence? Why do they do that over and over? They're supposed to be journalists that follow the evidence and follow the truth, but they don't. You're a conspiracy. They block this stuff out. Right. They're either too cowardly to go there, or they just want to protect the system,
Right. And then again, I come back to the situation that, you've experienced, and the situation that I've experienced, is that we don't see people coming forward with stronger evidence saying, hey, this point that you're making is incorrect. Right. They just deflect with some stupid lawsuit, accuse me or you of something we haven't done, try to deny you of money in the case of your pension, your retirement, the financial aspects that you've spoken of. They try to intimidate people against sponsoring Crowdsource the Truth, and they're threatening me to lawyer up, because they know, a small organization, obviously hiring a lawyer would put me out of business. So they try to put us in jeopardy rather than challenge our facts. And I certainly invite anyone with facts in these matters to join the conversation by emailing you or emailing me.
Sure.
We'll even bring them on the show.
Absolutely.
And debate them and things like that. I am particularly fascinated with the Robert Kennedy murder, and also I don't think we can talk about JFK and RFK without talking about MLK.
Yeah.
And I think those three murders bear striking similarities
Yes.
in the perpetrators and
Well, and then we have to add another one to that. If you look into this, and I think people should, is the JFK Jr.
Yes.
plane crash.
Let's talk about that.
When you look at that, it is now JFK Jr. would have beaten Hillary Rodham Clinton handily
in the New York Senate
in the New York
race.
Senate. Handily.
And he would have gone on to be
he
a
would
president.
have gone on to be president without question. He was a good man. He was an ethical man. He was charismatic. He was well liked by It was just a straight path to the White House.
Right.
We now know that in the plane crash, when they withheld investigation, they let the crash sit there for several days before they let anybody get in there and investigate it. But what they found was the fuel shutoff switch had been turned off. Now that thing had a manual override. You don't just kick it and it shut. You have to literally go in there, press the button, and turn the switch off as a safety mechanism. It had been manually turned off, so it just lost fuel and plunged into the ocean.
Right.
That alone should start an investigation. Has it? No. So we've got to look at that one too, because there has been an entity, I think we know who that may be, the shadow government, the crime syndicate, including the Clintons, did not want any of the Kennedys in office because they, as we know, directly challenged the shadow government, and in the case of New York, the Clinton crime syndicate. Donald Trump now is rocking the boat, challenging the shadow government, the CIA, the NSC, and the FBI, and look what they're trying to do to him. Just that we've got the same similar kind of thing going on right now. I hope it doesn't, God willing, it won't go to that extreme, but I think Trump is in jeopardy. I think he is at risk, and I think these elements are trying everything they can do to remove him from office.
Yeah, I've often, I mean, this is kind of answering my own question, but I've often thought that it's possible that the one advantage that Donald Trump has, and it's a big advantage, is just the knowledge of what happened to Kennedy and how to, he's obviously not going to publicize how he might be protecting himself against some of those things. But I'm glad you brought up that fuel shutoff switch, because I agree. I think there are a lot of problems with the investigation of the JFK Jr. plane crash, and it also... John Hankey, I believe his name is, made a very good, internet documentary about the murder of JFK and the murder of JFK Jr. And he points out in that documentary that this fuel shutoff thing is exactly what occurred in the Egypt Air crash.
Is that right? Yeah.
And we've heard a lot about MK Ultra, which was a CIA program to use psychotropic drugs and hypnosis and sleep deprivation and sexual abuse and all kinds of really intense mental duress to control people's thoughts. Quinn Michaels just introduced me to the notion of this black goo, this ferro liquid, it's like programmable matter that Quinn is saying can be ingested or injected and then used to physically control a person. It's difficult to imagine such a technology, but if there were these sort of, drone pilots, these like zombie guys that could turn off a fuel switch, it's hard to imagine. Could the CIA or someone have this level of technology?
Well, we have to remember that the CIA and some of the technical portions of the shadow government are at least 50 years ahead of what we know.
Wow.
When I used to brief people in the CIA, and they'd all sit out there bug-eyed, and we'd show them some of the things we were doing, it was always 20 years behind what we were really doing.
Wow.
So technologically, the CIA specifically is probably about 50 years ahead of the technology we're seeing.
Wow.
So could they do that? They absolutely could do that.
Wow.
Now, one of the things that's interesting, and RFK Jr. has made this point because he's interviewed Sirhan several times.
RFK Jr. has?
Yes.
Wow.
And he's absolutely convinced he's innocent. Sirhan has no recollection of that evening.
Right.
And that he has been pressed, interviewed, interrogated, and everybody comes out saying he's just a blank. And he did fire some shots. But he's he has no recollection of what happened. So could he have been programmed somehow? We also understand that he had been subjected to hypnosis several times before that, and there were records that indicated he was very easily hypnotized. He was very suggestible. Does the government have programs that can alter the mental state of people into a controllable fashion, considering the fact they've been studying this since MK Ultra, considering the fact that this is super compartmentalized information, considering the fact that they have the advanced technology to do it? The next question is, would they? And I think we all know the answer to that one. Yes, they would.
Yeah.
So when people start labeling things as conspiracy theories, I think the point has to be made. If you're going to label this a conspiracy theory, then you come back to us with the evidence against what we're saying, and that's what we're looking for.
Right.
If you want to disprove some of the things, great, we'll all sleep better at night.
Right.
But there's evidence. There's evidence in the RFK assassination that it wasn't just Sirhan. I think 6 extra rounds in the door frame, and on and on and on it goes. The LAP destroyed it. This sort of cover-up of evidence goes on and on and on, and the news media is complicit, which is probably maybe the worst part of the whole thing.
Yeah, and the thing that's so interesting is that, particularly with the JFK assassination, that was, at least in my view, where we start to see the news becomes the history. Because now when you study JFK assassination, we're looking at the Zapruder film, we're looking at Walter Cronkite, newspapers, etc. So if you can print, it's the same thing with the Vegas shooting, they print the story an hour later and it's like, boom, there, we've just printed history, push that out.
It becomes history.
Keep saying.
Yeah.
Now back to Sirhan for a second. I think the average person in their personal experience could imagine an idea of someone being delirious under the influence of drugs or something where they just don't remember anything. And I believe that is something along the lines of what happened to Sirhan. Either he was drugged or he was put through a program where some sort of trigger puts him into a...
I think there's evidence to indicate that. I know that RFK
But
Jr.
do you think he shot and killed? I mean, I think he just was shooting
He was just shooting randomly in the air.
And Roy Caesar, or whatever his name was.
Robert Kennedy was shot point blank in the back of the head. And Sirhan was not behind him. He was in front of him. There were 6 bullet holes that came from behind, and on and on and on the evidence goes. RFK Jr., who I think is a very, very nice, good man, is pushing to have further investigation of that. I'm supporting him 100% because I think he's right. His interviews with Sirhan indicate that Sirhan, there's just a blank there in his mind. Could they do that to somebody? Yes, of course they could. And if you add all the facts up, if Sirhan was not the only shooter, which is clear, then his accounts of blanking out could therefore be credible because there was a second shooter, and there was. Then if that's the case, then how in the world did they get that sort of mind control? Can they do that? Yes, they can. They can do it with chemicals. We've seen that. There was MK Ultra with the CIA. They were doing that. That has been super compartmentalized now. No one's heard a peep about it. Would the CIA do that kind of dark thing? Yeah, that's who they are. That's their MO. They've been doing it up until today, all the way into Syria.
Do you have any personal knowledge about, I think his name was Frank Olson, wasn't he a scientist at the CIA involved in MK Ultra? What can you tell us about that?
Frank, he was one of those mysterious suicides. Where Frank was participating. They were drugging Canadians and university students without their knowledge with LSD.
At McGill, right?
They were drugging him with LSD and messing a lot of people up without their knowledge that they were being drugged. Frank Olson was going to blow the whistle on that project and coincidentally jumped out of his hotel room to his death. With no indication of suicide or depression. Same old thing.
Right.
Whenever you see a suicide like that, you need to question it if it's in connection with... Suicide is it's a good mafia method, and it's a good shadow government method, especially in a plane crash, because it's easy to cover up and make it look, the evidence is either gone or make it look like the poor person did it to themselves. Or they'll drive them to suicide, which is many times what the shadow government, the CIA, will do, and especially with the whistleblowers, they will push them and drive them to suicide by systematically, and I have this in my 3rd lecture on YouTube, they will systematically destroy them financially, destroy their family, destroy their whole life like Gary Webb, until they have nothing, and then in his case he winds up with 2 bullet holes in his head, ruled a suicide. So they will push people as far as they can to try to get it to do them themselves. It's the ultimate crime.
Well, right. And of course, when there's a suicide, there's no homicide investigation. And likewise,
Right.
when there's a plane crash, it becomes an NTSB investigation.
Or a safety investigate. Yeah, right.
Right, right. It's really stunning. I mean, there's so many topics that we're touching on. I feel like you and I could do a series on
think we
all
could.
of these things.
Yes.
We should explore
I
that.
think we should,
I'd
yeah,
like to
yeah.
do that, particularly the RFK stuff.
Yeah.
I'd be very interested in supporting you in any effort.
Let's do that, because I know that subject is coming out very soon in detail, and I've got some very good honest contacts there. I think who would like to see that go forward. So let's look into that. I would like to do a program exploring RFK assassination in detail and some of the evidence. I would like to do that because I think it's important for people to see that.
I agree. And again, it's like building a house. You know, each of these things are a brick in the construction. And again, people are getting red-pilled by Vegas. People are getting red-pilled by 9/11. And it's also not a binary switch. I mean, for me, for a long time, I would say 1991, the Oliver Stone JFK film was a real red pill moment for me, where I started to believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was not the killer, the shooter. I don't think Lee Harvey Oswald fired a shot that day, but yet for a long time, I did believe the official story of 9/11. I think probably because it had such tremendous negative psychological impact that even thinking about it, exploring it, it's so repulsive to people. That's the first step.
Right.
You don't even want to think about it, let alone challenge it.
Right.
But now, of course, I do not believe the official story of 9/11 at all, and we got into a pretty good conversation about that last night.
Yeah.
There's just so many topics for us to cover.
Oh, I know. There's so many things from an evidentiary perspective that just do not add up with 9/11 and the official account, and people need to look into those. And as I mentioned last night, just quickly, it is part of this is it's a very difficult psychological line for people to cross. That there was more to 9/11 than just, and the planes did hit the building, but there was something more to 9/11 than just a terrorist attack, that there may have been inside involvement. When you cross that line, you lose the security feeling of your government. You lose the government's protection over you. You become mocked by your friends and others who don't look into the facts. But more than anything, people don't want to cross that line of, my God, my government would do this, or someone inside would do this to 3,000 people.
Right.
Most people, and a psychologist has come out and given a whole lecture on this, most people cannot cross that psychological line because it is so mentally shocking.
Traumatic.
It's traumatic. I remember when I first crossed that line, because I was inside the agency when 9/11 happened, watched it on TV with some other feds. And when I came out and examined all the evidence, I had that moment. It's like, my God.
See, that's fascinating, because here you are, a CIA insider, but again, this is an example of the compartmentalization. You were not, we're presuming, of course, that the CIA was involved in planning and executing 9/11, or elements of the CIA, but it's so compartmentalized that if you're not involved in it, you're part of the victim of the psychological operation.
The vast majority, excuse me, of CIA people do not know the compartmental operations that the CIA does. I'll give you a classic example.
Yeah.
I was on the staff of William Casey, the director of the CIA, right in his office, right with him all the time, at home, around him all the time, and yet we, as the agents, had no idea that William Casey had set up a targeting and bombing of an imam they thought was related to a terrorist act. Turns out he wasn't. They missed this imam. They detonated an explosive and killed 84 women and children at a school. And it turns out the imam was not even responsible for this so-called terrorist attack. Well, that was going on while we were on his staff. And we didn't even know it. So that shows you that the CIA is likened to like a castle with all these inner compartments, especially at the top. You get a clearance for one inner compartment, then they give you a clearance for another inner compartment. So most people in the agency, until you get to the senior levels, have no idea what covert operations are doing, and the CIA does that for its own protection. So just because somebody doesn't know about it doesn't mean it's not happening. And that the case with William Casey is a classic example. So can the CIA be doing things that most employees are unaware of? They've been doing that for decades now. Yes, of course.
And then Casey, of course, mysteriously drowned in a kayak after testifying.
You mean William Colby?
Oh, Colby, sorry.
I had the honor of meeting Colby when I was on the 7th floor. He was a very intelligent man, and actually a pretty ethical man. When he came out to testify before the committees, he's the one that lifted the veil on MK Ultra and some of the other programs.
The heart attack gun.
The heart attack gun, and he was cooperating with everyone. What happened with Colby later in his life, he had a very loyal following within the CIA. And someone within the CIA had overhead satellite imagery showing that the feds fired first at Waco. Documented satellite imagery.
Wow.
Now, being loyal to Colby, who had a loyal following because he's a very ethical man, as ethical as you could be in the CIA. So they came to Colby. This was actually in the Dallas Morning News in Texas, here in Texas.
That's got to be a CIA cutout.
The person on the inside came to Colby and said, look, we've got satellite imagery that shows that the feds fired first at Waco. We'll give that to you. William Colby came out publicly and he said, I have satellite imagery that shows that the feds fired first. Ooh. I'm going to bring that out before Congress to testify. 3 months later, his canoes found floating down the Potomac without him in it. The TV was on in his house. I think he had dinner sitting on the table. And I think it took them 3 weeks to find him. They found his body up against a sandbar. Without a question in my mind, he was assassinated, murdered by the CIA itself to shut that piece of evidence up, which he was going to bring forth. There's no question in my mind about that.
Wow. I've never heard those things before about the death of Colby. I always assumed it had to do with his revelations to the church committee.
No, it was concerning Waco.
Wow. And of course, Waco happened under Bill Clinton.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's just so much there. Will we ever see him on the witness stand?
Clinton, you mean? I'd rather see him pass the witness stand. We're getting, Jason, we're getting close. We're getting close to those two, closer than ever in history. So I think for the first time it's possible to see Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton indicted and possibly charged. More possible than ever. I think it is now possible as long as we keep pushing and someone does something about Jeff Sessions and gets him either out of there, gets him out of the fear that has him paralyzed or whatever it is, and either get him to move or get somebody in that place to move, because the felonies are clear, the criminal activity is clear. Why he's not moving on it, we need to find out, and Trump needs to do something about that.
I hope he's listening to your message, to the message that we're putting out, because it's really important. I mean, I'm just realizing more and more every day what a breakthrough social media is and how it's allowing us, it's almost like, this is the one weapon we have to fight them. It's our asymmetric warfare against this evil cabal of...
You just nailed it. Yeah, one of the primary reasons I come on shows like yours especially is this is the last freedom of the press.
Yeah.
This is all we have left. And in your case, in my case, we're not doing this to make money. We're not doing this we basically have to make money to survive.
Right.
So we're not influenced by advertisers. We're not influenced by the major media. We're not influenced by any conglomerates. We're doing this essentially as citizen journalists. This is the freedom of the press of now and the future, and this is all we have left. I love good citizen sleuth journalists. That's the freedom of the press today, and that's what we need. People out there. There are some people out there on the internet, like yourself and others, that are as good as any federal investigator I ever worked with in terms of digging up information and connecting the dots. So yes, this is where it starts, right here. And this is where the hope is, right here. This broadcast is an example. This is going out. Do you think CNN would have me on to say these things? No, of course not. MSNBC? Absolutely not. But we're getting this out this way because it's the only way now to do it.
Absolutely. And I'm hearing stories from people all the time about how their appearances on even Fox are canceled at the last moment. And we've been talking quite a lot about RFK. He was very involved in, within the first days of Trump's presidency, a vaccine safety investigation board.
Right.
And again, that's another one of these topics where they've tried to make it this binary thing. Either you're anti-vax
Right.
and crazy,
Right.
or you're, putting 90 poorly tested vaccines into your infant child. And I have learned a lot from that movie Vaxxed about how
Yeah.
it's such a complicated situation. And that was really my first introduction to Robert Kennedy Jr. And I found it very curious that Robert De Niro was with Robert Kennedy Jr.
His son is
and-
autistic, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
and so obviously this is an issue that President Trump is addressing in a way that Hillary Clinton certainly would not.
Absolutely.
And then yet Robert De Niro comes out with that totally idiotic, useless comment
Yeah.
at the Emmys. Why would he do that?
I'm not a big fan of De Niro. I'm not sure De Niro's the brightest candle in the pub, in my opinion. But I can tell you this: Robert Kennedy Jr. What did they do with him immediately? Labeled him a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
When his evidence with his dad's murder and the assassination is real concrete, and I've seen most of it, if not the vast majority of it. His talks and evidence about vaccines are scientifically
Yes.
based. And yet they come out and they brand RFK Jr. as a conspiracy theorist, because that's what they do to silence any investigation.
Right.
To his credit, he's pushing forward. And to the Vax team credit, they're pushing forward. Because you're right, they do this binary thing. You're either for it or against it.
Right.
You're either conspiracy theorist or you go with the mainstream. And that's the kind of thing shows like yours and others need to break through and get the truth out. I think RFK Jr. I think he's pretty courageous in what he's doing many times.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, even the people who are out there, possibly there's doctors who might doubt the medical evidence. In my view, I don't know if it was the most powerful, but the most compelling to me was the legal and political evidence that he puts together, and that movie Vaxxed presents about how under Ronald Reagan, who I'm convinced was controlled by George H.W. Bush, they passed this Vaccine Injury Act and created the Vaccine Court, and they categorized vaccines as biological, not pharmaceutical, far less testing. I mean, these are all typical deep state, which is pharmaceutical companies, shadow government, which is all the people that we're talking about. This is the playbook. This is how they do it.
Yes, and it's an operational method they've been using for over 60 years because it works.
Yeah.
Virtually every time.
Yeah. It's really, it's daunting. It's a lot of information for people to deal with. But as you've said, I hope we're on the precipice of solving this matter. I know you've got to get together, and as do I, to sort of clear out of here pretty soon. Is there anything you want to share with the audience before we wrap it up?
I'd just like to share this. I want to encourage people to go to Crowdsource the Truth and programs like yours. The reason that you and I have become friends and I interview with you because I have great respect for your approach and attack on the truth and search for the truth. And you're a very objective guy, very intelligent guy too, and I appreciate that. You and Charles just splitting the Clinton Foundation wide open.
Yeah.
I appreciate that kind of journalism and that kind of fierce approach and search for the truth. I would encourage the audience to begin watching shows like this and interviews like ours and searching out the information that we're presenting for themselves, because we need an informed public, and we're getting millions of people are becoming informed by the day, but we need an informed public. We know the news media is concealing information, they're twisting information, and they're putting out propaganda, and they're part of this syndicate we're talking about. So I'd encourage people just finally to go to programs like this and get information like this and then check it out for themselves, because there is a revolution starting in America of people that are getting informed with this stuff, and they're starting to mobilize, and they're fed up with the shadow government, they're fed up with the propaganda of the news media, and we saw them last night, a bunch of really good American people that are getting together and bringing the truth out, and that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, Kevin. And thank you for everything that you've been doing, the personal sacrifices that you've made. I want to encourage people again to go to your website, fortheloveoffreedom.net, and they should be buying the book and reading From the Company of Shadows. It's a great book filled with fascinating information that you're just simply not going to get anywhere else. I don't think anyone has ever written a book quite like this. So it's very important that we support patriots like Kevin and keep this movement going. And thanks so much for inviting me to cover this presentation. I really think what you did last night was historic.
Well, that's good to hear.
And
Yeah.
this mission that you're on is historic. I hope that you can become some sort of advisor to Donald Trump. In closing, what would you say to President Trump as far as what can be done about reforming the CIA?
I'd say, Mr. President, what we need is an objective, separate congressional body that is created and formed for real oversight of the CIA and these other intelligence agencies, that is connected to the American public and to the voters, and also a committee of oversight created to monitor and manage the government's use or abuse of secrecy, and have that body answer to the American people. And I would say to President Trump, keep doing what you're doing, be careful, but keep doing what you're doing and holding these shadow government agencies, the CIA and the FBI, accountable, and have Congress select Congress to begin really investigating these agencies, because they have not done so yet. This is a people's movement. It's the revolution that got him elected, and I think all these millions of people want to see this happen. They want to see these shadow government agencies really investigated and reformed. And I would encourage the president, he's got millions of people behind him, because he's doing some things some of us dreamed about, defunding the UN, and things we've been wishing for over 20 years.
Yeah.
Keep it up. Watch out for the shadow government's influence on you, Mr. President, because they're going to try to deceive you and work you over. I think the president knows that, but just keep doing that and keep shaking things up, man, because we need it.
Absolutely. Kevin Shipp, everybody. Thank you so much, Kevin. I
Thank
look
you,
forward
thanks
to
for
our future
thanks for having me, Jason.
conversations.
Absolutely, you bet.
And thanks for watching, everybody. Take care. I'll see you tomorrow.